All right, so this talk is about a developer superpower that I've acquired over the last couple of years. I think developer superpowers are interesting. For me, I've had a handful over the course of my career, from like learning object-oriented programming to React. And in this case, the superpower is event-driven workflows. So just adding this idea of event-driven workflows to my applications has totally changed how I even think about developing applications at this point, and just opened up a whole world of possibilities for us in our practice. This is actually just a love letter to Ingest, which is a service. They don't pay or sponsor me or anything like that. I'm not a DevRel, I'm just a developer. I love them, and it's an amazing service. This idea, these principles, this superpower is not strictly related to this single service. There's other services and other ways to approach this. This is just the way I do it and the way I'm going to share it with you. This is how it works. Events from your app go to ingest. That hits an API route that executes functions inside of your application. That's one of the most interesting aspects of this to me is we are not sending out workloads to be executed someplace else. They all get executed based on events that emit from our system in our system. Then those functions in your app can then emit more events, and you get this kind of loop of eventing. I thought I'd start with the basics. This is how we get going and get ingest installed. This is in the context of a Next.js app. It works in other contexts as well, but I'm npm install ingest. Then I come in here and I'm going to set up my page to actually, let's see. I'm going to create a new route. So you have to have the API route someplace in your application for ingest to connect to. This is a Next.js API route. Ingest gives you the ability to then configure. You have to give it an ID. You export your get, post, and put, and then we serve it with the ingest client. The next thing we need to do is actually add some functions. And in this case, I'm just adding a quick hello world because that's what this is our hello world. Give that an ID also, just to differentiate it from other functions that'll be in our system. And then we give an event that will actually trigger this hello world. So someplace in our application, we are going to send an event for the hello world function to trigger. Then we give it something to actually do. And in this case, the event is just returning the message that came from it. Now we add that event function to our configuration, and it's set up. It's ready to go. We're connected. We just need to emit the event. So someplace in our application, and it's important to note that in this context right here, we're looking at React server components. So this is, you can see the use server in there. So this is actually being emitted. The events get emitted server side. You wouldn't want to have client side event emitting in your workflows. It would be super bad. So we're not doing that. This is actually getting emitted from the server side and the server function. We send that event out. We send a message. We run it, and we're done. Now we have event-driven workflows in our application. It's not the end. I got more to talk about. So this is Next.js. I love it. I use it. I've got like just kind of go whatever Guillermo tells me to do is how I live my life and develop my applications. But there's lots of other ways to do this. Ingest runs in Astro, AWS Lambda, Cloudflare Workers, Remix, SvelteKit, wherever you want it, it actually lives there. So it's neat in that respect. And you can also, inside of your ingest application, run it across all of these services if you needed to. I don't know why you would want to use all of them, but if in our case, we might have an AWS Lambda to execute workloads for much less cost than executing AWS Lambda workflows on Vercel, for instance. And in a lot of cases, we just do it the Vercel way because it's very convenient for us. But sometimes if we have processes that require more, we might move that over to AWS Lambda. And because we're in an event-driven system, we're able to. Anyway, so I didn't introduce myself. My name is Joel Hooks. I work on badass.dev. We call it Badass Courses. I built Egghead.io. That's kind of was the first thing that got me started. It was the first iteration of this whole thing for me. I'm on Blue Sky. I think y'all should join us over there if you haven't yet. If you're still sitting on X, looking at ads and dealing with the bots, cool. But in my opinion, Blue Sky is more Twitter than X currently is. And come on over. Yeah. These are the products that we work on. Our platform is called Course Builder now. Some of them are Epic Web, Epic React with Kenzie Dodds, testing accessibility, Total TypeScript, among others. Here's the actual platform. It's visible source. It's not open source. This has a full kind of event-driven workflow in the back. If you like looking at source code, it's there to look at it. I call it visible, not open source, because I do not offer support for the code that you will be looking at. It's for us, but I do like to have it open. It just makes things more convenient, and it also, for people who like to learn that way, is a good resource. So this is me. I'm a glue coder. I would never write a database. I don't invent frameworks. I put things together and deliver value to the end users is kind of my thing. It always has been. I like taking the disparate parts and bringing them together. It's what I love doing. The way we build applications these days, they're all distributed systems. At least our applications are distributed systems. We have our databases, right? We use several databases. We deploy to Vercel. We use Stripe for payments. We have to process video. All of our platforms are very video-centric, so Mux, UploadThing, DeepGram, these services come into play. ConvertKit, Postmark, email is a big thing for us. Customers want their emails. I don't know if they want them, but they need them. And these days we're using Gen AI from Anthropic and OpenAI and other similar services too. So all of this together makes for a very interesting kind of complex system that at the end of the day is extremely event-driven. Is anybody using event-driven architectures or building event-driven applications in general? I'd say if you're like working on modern web apps, it's almost impossible to avoid that kind of event-driven flow. And even if you're building, say, a React app, and it's that sort of client side, it's super event-driven as well. I want to give an example real quick. So somebody's paid us money. We have some security here. When we handle a webhook from Stripe, we need to make sure that it's actually coming from Stripe. So when we're messing with people's money, we want to make sure that everything is legitimate. It's just important. We do some validation. We go through and we look and make sure that all of the information that's coming through in the webhook is correct. We have some sort of business logic. And then finally, we have a response that we send back to Stripe to let them know that the webhook was successful. And this part to me is what I am calling the workflow, right? Like we have some work that needs to be done. We need to validate the incoming information, and then we need to process it and do whatever needs to happen. In this case, we're updating a database and then sending an email. This to me is really interesting, and this is where ingest comes into my life and replaces, I don't know if you've ever seen an actual Stripe event handler. I don't know if I have one. I might show you at the end, but like these things can get really big, right? Like you end up doing a lot of work. Like when I shrunk that down and said validation in business, that was like shrinking down something that's like this big down to something that's fits on a slide basically. But with ingest, it actually fits on the slide because what we want to do is we receive that webhook, validate it, and then send that, hey, a webhook was received event into our system. And this kind of changes everything up. This is a function. This is an ingest function. And up at the top, we have the configuration. So it has an ID and it has that event that we're listening for. Additionally, we are filtering here. So in this case, it says checkout session received. That's the event that we're looking for. Here's the config. You can do all sorts of really amazing things. And this is where, you know, like you could roll your own event-driven workflow system, no doubt. But adding concurrency, the ability to throttle, idempotency, rate limiting, debouncing, priority, batching events, what happens on failure, cancel on. Those things get really, really challenging to implement at any sort of scale beyond the trivial. And that's why I go with a service instead of trying to do this myself. It's super powerful just at the end of the day. Like in the simple case, it's really useful. But once you start getting into this, you're like, oh, okay. Here's the trigger. It's just the event that occurs. The trigger is interesting, can also be a cron. So you can trigger these on cron, and there's other ways to trigger events in ingest as well. You can filter it. It's extremely handy for lots of reasons. Like if this isn't a checkout event, I don't want to run all these, so we go ahead and filter it at this level. And now we have the handler, and once again, now we are into the workflow part of the application. This is the data that we need, so we're going to validate it again, or we're validating it for the first time in this case. And now we have a workflow step. These are all asynchronous, so you see an await step run. These are asynchronous functions, and they're doing some sort of magic under the hood where this can rerun over and over again, and it kind of caches and memoizes the return results from these. So each function actually executes in your compute, on your servers, in your space, but they're managing the execution of these. So when you run one of these functions, it's executing in the context of your server, your database, all of the things that are in your application. In our case, we're in a Next application, so we can just import what we need from our application, and it just works here. Here's another workflow step where we're handling the purchase and we're recording it in our database. And finally, we're sending that email. So functionally, this is the same as what we would be handling in a Stripe webhook handler. We're just handling it in this space instead. And what we get out of this is things like error handling and retries and all that fun stuff. Finally, we return some results. The return from this is mostly for an observability. We get a nice dashboard, which I'll show you at the end of this. But you get that so you can then go back and look and see what has occurred and what data came out of it. So for me, for a long time, I used the service convert kit. It's now called Kit. I should update my slide because Nathan would appreciate it. They've built a really nice service that does a lot of marketing emails and handles automation and other things that you'd want to do. And having my own, like taking that out of ConvertKit, I actually love the service, but there's a lot of reasons similar to why I'm using ingest, because I want to have my users close to my database and run my own automations and doing that sort of thing. So for many, many years, maybe 5-6 years, I've thought about and considered how I would build my own ConvertKit and have yet to get to the point where it made sense to stop using ConvertKit. Nathan, who founded ConvertKit, is a friend of mine, and when I told him what I wanted to do, this is what he told me. Just dead ass looked me in the eyes and said, good luck. And he's right, like it's a really hard problem. Sending email at scale is a really hard problem. The automations are a really hard problem. He's done a great job of it, but he was just being honest. This is what it looks like kind of at a basic level. This is a map of the kind of email automation that we want to do and why it is interesting to us to have it close to our database, because a lot of this just requires something where we have access to the users and access to that context. These are the kind of the types of events. And this is the tricky part, right? Like waiting for an event, waiting for something to happen. If a customer subscribes to our service, you can send that email immediately and they'll get it a second later, and maybe they'll get a stack of 5 when you sign up for a service and you get 5 emails right as you sign up. That's cool, but what if I want to send them something a week later? What if I want to wait for them to do an important activity and then send them an update? What if I want to wait for them to do nothing and send them an email to ask them, why aren't you doing the thing, and encourage them to make progress? And then decisions based on, like what level did they buy? What did they do? How did they do it? All those kind of decisions at the end become the tricky parts of this, larger workflow that we're dealing with. So here's a little baby ConvertKit that we've built, and this is a production example. So this is actually something that we're running. You have the handler function. We're going to actually wait 3 days. We don't want to send that stack of emails immediately. So in this case, this is a wait for event, and it's set to timeout for 3 days. If it's the same customer. So if you have a lot of customers, hopefully, it's only going to run if it's for this single customer and not. I blinked out, so I'll have to project now, which is fine. They did it, congrats, they made something, they did the thing, that's great. So we're gonna send them a congrats email, but on the other hand, if they did not do the thing that we want them to do for our application, whatever that is, in our case, it's usually complete a lesson or start or make some sort of progress, we're gonna go ahead and send a follow-up and just ask them why or encourage them or tell them what the thing is that they're supposed to do, because sometimes people are lost. In our case, people collect courses. I don't know if anybody here collects courses. They're way better if you actually do them. Just saying. Right, so now we have a workflow. We have kind of a baby ConvertKit. Honestly, this is a work in progress. We're still not there. Other things come up. We still use ConvertKit. I was in there this morning sending emails, so we're not quite there. I recorded a full, me implementing a full production example in Jack Harrington's Pro Next.js product, and that's what this is. If you want to watch a 25-minute screencast of me actually doing the code to implement one of these, here it is. And I'll leave this up for a second. I'm actually gonna, is it time? 3 minutes? All right, cool, that's perfect. So I thought it'd be fun just to show like my favorite, one of my absolute favorite parts of using this. I'm gonna start my dev server. I'm not on the latest Next, so it takes a second. I'm not using the Turbo Pack yet, so we got to wait for Webpack. While we're doing that, at the same time, when I started that up, this is my ingest dev server. The ingest dev server is probably the coolest piece of freaking software that I've touched in years. It is amazing. This is, if anything out of this ingest has changed my life, it's the dev server. All right, so it has to connect, so it's actually connecting. It looks for the API and it's kind of pinging in the background, looking for that application to spin up. I'm gonna come in here and I'm in dev mode, so I'm gonna make a test purchase. I'm not gonna hit Klarna. All right, so as soon as I do that, I'm gonna come over here to ingest. And you can see that event gets picked up, the Stripe checkout session completed. And then it does just a gang load of work for me, right? Like it goes through and all of the workflows that happen after that, from adding the purchase to ConvertKit to waiting for progress. So this is actually running and it's waiting for them to make some sort of progress. And if I went and completed a lesson, then that would trigger that. Post-purchase workflow follow-up. So this actually has the things I was talking about. Sending the post-purchase email and adding some roles to Discord, so we do Discord work afterwards. Here's what's cool though, right? Like if you've ever done this, I don't know if anybody works with, does anybody work with Stripe? 424242424242. That's the test card. So like you get this muscle memory for doing it. And unfortunately, 2024 was the year where you can't just 4242424242 and you have to pause to do 24 in the middle of that because of the year change. 24, it can't be in the past. So that's a bummer. So I've done that so many times, like thousands of times I've had to go and enter that, and I'm making purchases, I'm doing this, I'm working on the email, I'm doing whatever. With this, I can come in and I can just hit rerun, and it's literally gonna like rerun that job and run all those events again. I can pick any one of these events. If I just wanna work, if I'm working on the post-purchase email, that's not a good one because that's like a delay. So I can rerun that, and it's just gonna rerun that email. I can check it, I can check the formatting, I can test the email. If it sends Slack messages, I can just rerun them and do that. You can come in here and not only rerun them, you can change the data. So you can go in and make little tweaks to the data just to test different scenarios. And I literally use this for writing scripts or doing work in the database. And I'll come in and I'll write an ingest function that I run locally to kind of just run workloads and do things in day to day, because I'm able to like stack it and it does error checking and I can rerun it. And this dev server is fantastic. They've also just recently, they have a self-hosted version that's kind of like Ingest Lite that they've released. They're very open source and have a wonderful team. Can't recommend them enough, but ingest aside, event-driven workflows, it's a superpower. I love it. I think you will too. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.